we did had some interesting stuff that I wanted to talk about this week. It's another time is a flat circle moment where I don't understand why these arguments come up time and time again, Thorin. But we had the question of, why does 100 Thieves get to play their academy team in the last game of the season?
Of course. Yeah.
Isn't that disrespectful to the tournament? This is affecting our playoff standings. So what's your take?
I mean, basically, my take is a very consistent one because I've obviously spent a lot of my career thinking about formats and different tournaments and trying to figure out here's what I do, as I always say, I try to think what the format selects for. Like, what is it essentially saying? I want you to do this. This is how I want the tournament to be set up. So I always point out, for example, the reason I hate the World's Group format is it literally treats you as if the second best LPL team is as good as whoever, like, was from fucking Vietnam. For real, that's what the system tells you. It tells you I'm going to treat number 2 LPL the same as the best from whoever, fucking GAM, if they're the team that qualifies. So similarly, right, what you're talking about with this tournament, Monty, here is a league system, which is effectively a round-robin system, right? Every round-robin system ever held will run into these problems, especially the more games you have in it. So people know from Worlds, which is a round-robin, those group stages, when do you ever get a Worlds that has 0 tiebreakers? It might have happened once, I don't know, but almost every year there's tiebreakers, right? It's always tiebreakers. If it's not, by the way, even if just for first place, sometimes not even to get out of the group. So you never know, right? There's always that, because that's what happens with that format. So the flaw of having a round-robin format is you will always have games in a round-robin format that do not matter to one or sometimes even both of the teams. And the problem when you get that game is the team then, since by definition it does not matter to them, have the choice to not try their hardest to win the game. And unfortunately, that is a literal feature. It's not a bug. It is a feature of this system. Now, what's funny is that allows some people to do what TSM did, and you can not care about the game, but you can do something fun with it. Like you can have a weird role swap, and you can do whatever you want with the lineups. Or you could do what 100 Thieves has done, which is more like the sporting approach, where in sports, the NBA is obviously massive for this. You do the load management, where you don't want a guy getting burned out or injured in this scenario. So you just let him have the last game off, because it doesn't matter. You're in the playoffs. You've already got your seed locked in. So basically, the problem is this, Monty. If I ask myself qualitatively as a viewer of the product, do I like teams fielding their academy squad or role swapping? No, it's terrible. Like, I actually did a watch party during that particular EG versus 100 Thieves match. And I obviously arranged the watch party at the beginning of the week when I thought that would be an amazing game right after C9TL. It was a terrible game. It was fucking garbage. So I hate that part. But as I say, if you allow this system, there's not really any way around it. There's no real rule you can make that changes this format to stop this. And so this isn't even the worst example of it. You can have games where I intentionally put in bad players and I even tell the players, try to accidentally not win because it's better for XYZ reasons if we lose the game. So it can get even worse. I'm just not a fan of round robin in general. So I think, as you say, I think people are lost in the woods if they think it's specifically about 100 Thieves on that one. It's more like what the format sort of implies you should do, because if you go the other way and try and argue why should you play all the players, look, I could make like a sort of philosophical argument that, you know, you should try your hardest and why not go for greatness and win as many games. I could go with some angle like that, but it's not really that great a sell, is it, to people who on the practical level are just thinking, I don't want to get stuff away for next week, I don't want to play an extra week, I want to give an academy player a chance. So I don't really find it that big an outrage. I just didn't enjoy the game myself.
No, and also, like you said, the part of when you design formats is that you want to minimize the number of meaningless games. And unfortunately, in long form league formats where you're doing 5 round robins, it's very, very difficult to do that. And to describe the situation that happened, guys, because had 100 Thieves won that game, they would have had the same record as TSM, but because there's 5 round robins, the head-to-head tiebreaker, you don't need to play a tiebreaker because the head-to-head is always going to tiebreak for you. And what happened was 100 Thieves was 2-3 on the season against TSM. So even if they had won, had the identical record, they would have lost due to the head-to-head tiebreaker, right? So that's the issue. And you created this problem. And the thing is, there are a lot of arguments, people saying, we'll just destroy them really quickly. Some people are saying, well, there's no injuries in esports, so therefore you should have to field your roster. The reason why the NFL or the NBA or sports allow the second stringers to come in is because of injury. That is true, but also there are other inherent advantages, such as what 100 Thieves was very transparent about saying. Papa Smithy said this. Here you go. we want to play our academy players in this because we want more time to prepare for playoffs. Now, objectively, given 100 Thieves' current condition, you would say, wow, it's great that they have the luxury of having an extra day because they haven't looked as strong at the end of the split as they did at the start of the split. So this is a real advantage that they have earned and won by playing super well beforehand. When you have 45 games in the regular season, Cloud9 had 44 different times where they could have affected the outcome and not been in this situation, right? 44 different times to take the third seed, to have the easier time against Dignitas, to win a couple more games and be in top 2 and get the bye, right? You could look at, you look at Cloud9, they could have beaten EG this same week. If they had won the game against EG, then they wouldn't have been in this position. So to say that, 100 Thieves is somehow, competitively dishonest, they don't have competitive integrity by doing this, is fucking ridiculous. They earned this through the last 6 months of competition. Other teams didn't earn it. And why do they owe Cloud9 or anyone else anything? They don't owe Cloud9 the opportunity to get into the third seed. And it's not like they forfeited the match. They had a chance to win that match. In fact, a lot of the players on their academy are very hyped up players. Luger had a good individual performance in that game. You look at players like Kenby and Tenacity that are getting a lot of buzz right now as probable, I would say, future LCS players. So it also increases their value now that they have an LCS game under their belt, that they can have that experience that 100 Thieves can point to and say, hey, if we want to sell this player, we have that option in the future. So I don't know. It just seems completely absurd to me on its face that anybody could possibly complain about this, and especially those teams that were fucking around with their rosters.
It's the most egregious one in there.
Nobody forced you to put King in Cloud9. Nobody made you do that. Team Liquid, hey, you didn't have to bench Alfari. That was your choice. And now you're like, oh, I guess those games mattered after all. It's like, no shit.
The Team Liquid one is the worst one, because if people don't know, it was Santorin himself who openly complained about exactly this issue, and specifically with the 100 Thieves Cloud9 one, right? And the that part I have is this, as you just said there, Monty. That's fucking rich, Santorin. First of all, you haven't even been playing, mates. I don't know why you're talking about this split, so forget about that. And then secondly, your team benched the best player in the entire LCS for the majority of the split. That's fucking rich that you're talking about teams not fielding their best roster to win the game. By definition, your team didn't do that. And I don't want to hear any nonsense about, secretly Jenkins. It wasn't. That was all fucking nonsense and people still don't get it. So listen, it's not the end of the world. And I will acknowledge there's obviously a difference between putting your entire academy squad and one player different. But my point is that I guarantee Team Liquid lost a bunch of games because they didn't have Alfari, or Cloud9 had Sven out of the game, etc. And the point is, we're talking now about the fine margins of what one game does at the end of the split. Because there's another thing people love to do in esports, Monty. You'll have seen this yourself. Unfortunately, it manifests the most in open circuit tournaments, because people are playing so many tournaments they don't have time to look into the rules. People only go mental and lose their mind about rule formats when it's the last game and the last game decides everything. So they do it at Worlds when it's a tiebreaker, or like that scenario in the IM years ago where Gambit had to win the game faster than someone else won a game. They only go mental at the end because they never looked into the rule format, and they only realised at the end, oh, this could actually just hurt me specifically. So this is outrageous. What a mad narcissist you are. You were just cool with it. If you benefited, you'd have been cool with it, would you? What the fuck's that?
It's just so egregious, because here's an analogy for you. It's like Cloud9 and Team Liquid intentionally lit their house on fire, and then it burned to the ground, and then their neighbor is across the street just living his life, and they're like, you're not helping me rebuild. You're a bad person. It's like, no, you fucking did that to yourselves. Intentionally, very deliberately, you made these decisions. And it's not their fault or their responsibility that you were an idiot. So I'm baffled by this entire. I mean, it wasn't a big outrage. I'm not going to. It seems like most people had a very reasonable take on this. Yeah, it seemed most people had a very reasonable take. So it wasn't like there was a large section of the community that I think was really wrong. But I just think it's egregious coming from some of these orgs. That you were given so many opportunities, so many, way more. In fact, you were giving more opportunities to dig yourself out of this hole. There was only one game separating you. It's like, a coin flip goes one way in one of these games, and all of a sudden you're benefiting from it instead of on the short end of the stick. It's a very small margin. So I don't know. I thought that was pretty egregious overall. Now, the format thing that I didn't think was egregious, which I talked about earlier, was Parth saying that as TSM, getting the first seed doesn't convey a lot of benefits. Now, this is partially disingenuous because the thing about the LCS formats is if you're in the top 2 seed, you get a bye, and you only have to win one best of 5 to qualify for Worlds, which is objectively making it a lot easier, right? A lot easier in the playoff bracket. But what he said is that, now this is also a far-fetched situation, but he said basically that TSM, because there's no reseeding in LCS, right? The LEC brackets actually reward higher seeding via placement into the losers bracket, and the first place team gets to select their opponent, which we will be very interested to talk to Larson about very shortly. But when you look at TSM, let's say Dignitas, very unlikely scenario, because I think most people would peg EG as winning the split. Dignitas somehow upsets EG. Well, TSM doesn't get to play Dignitas. They get to play the winner of C9 TL. 100 Thieves gets to play Dignitas, which is kind of lame. I will give that one. I think that reseeding is even traditional sports like the NFL has put reseeding into effect recently in their playoff formats. And I think that there should be stronger incentives, especially when you just lengthened the regular season to include more games, which means that you are putting more emphasis on the regular season by playing more games, which means that the team in first place should have a higher reward, and that higher reward should include reseeding.
Yeah, I think it's a totally fair point.
I agree.
Yeah, it's totally fair. Want to see more cool, funny, interesting clips based on topics from my content? Well, subscribe to this channel then, or, be a pleb and don't.